fourth inning. I don't think they hit an.
I think they scored one or two.
I think they scored, but there was like one inning where they had bases loaded, or they had men on second and third with no outs, or one out. I think one out, and they didn't bring anybody in. I mean, they didn't need to. They were up by so many. So, anyways, they're really, 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 really good, the Dodgers right now. So
their pitching is excellent.
And our Trevor Bauer from Santa Clarita was pitching yesterday, so that was kind of cool.
I guess his parents still live up here.
They do.
Yeah,
they do. And they did put up during the game that Trevor Bauer is from Hart High School. They put that up there on the screen. So
now, did he know the hitting coach from the Dodgers?
I'm not sure, because I haven't talked to. He's younger than Robert, so they didn't overlap.
Oh, he's younger than Robert?
Yeah, Robert's 30. Robert's 30. Robert's 33. So they didn't overlap. They weren't there at the same time, but Trevor Bauer went to Valencia United Methodist Church when my friend John Shaver was the minister there. So John's now in San Diego, but he used to go to John's, and his family still goes to John's church. So I know this is we're now on Facebook, but or we're soon to be on Facebook, but we are very proud of the fact that we have these connections to Santa Clarita. And Francine did get a video of Robert, her son's World Series ring, which
cool.
You know what? I think I might actually be able to show it on the screen. I will.
Oh, that's right. That's the way that one you can stall out later on this evening.
I can. Well, I don't know. She might actually be coming on, but I would. It is actually kind of a cool thing to show. It is giant, this ring.
Yeah, they just showed on TV.
I'm going to show you I'm going to show you something you didn't see on TV, I don't think.
Jeremy got a ring from the Kings.
Right. When they won the Stanley Cup.
And he brought the ring to us, and that, talking about huge, that was big too.
I'm going to show you did they show you on TV the box that the ring comes in?
Last night during the pregame show, they were showing the box. No, Clayton Kershaw was on Jimmy Kimmel, and he showed the box on Jimmy Kimmel.
Oh, so you did see it?
I saw it.
I had never seen a box that one of these rings comes in.
That's incredible.
So here's the box. I'm going to show it to you right now, guys. I know it's it's not a great quality, but you'll see it enough, I think.
Like a video.
That's the box that comes in with a video of them getting the trophy.
Wow.
Jesus Christ.
Look at the size of that ring.
Nice.
Yeah. So that is Francine Van Squake's ring from the Dodgers. That's the closest most of us. Okay, let's face it, all of us are coming to that World Series ring. Well, who knows? I mean, maybe one of us will see it one day from somebody on the Dodgers in person. Where's Joy? We don't have Joyce. Where's Joyce? Is she okay?
My friend, Rabbi Mark, my friend Mike Malarkey used to work for the Dodgers. He was head of all the computer stuff for years, and he has one of the trophies, in his house in Saugus. They live in Saugus, and that was not obviously this World Series, but 88, was it 88? Yeah, he was quite up there. I used to get my tickets through him for years.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's great to see that.
Yeah, well, it took a long time. It took 32
And then
years.
one time when we were at a Dodger game, they had one of those Fiesta things, and Jim and I got to hold the trophy and take a picture with it. So that was cool too.
Very nice.
But I still haven't gotten to a game. None of our season ticket group has been able to use our tickets yet.
Well,
And Joyce is going to join us in a minute.
Okay, here she is.
Yeah,
she's here. Perfect. So I wasn't stalling, but I do actually have a video that I do want to share, especially as it goes down as the night sky comes upon us right now. And again, tonight, tonight is we're officially, this is a kind of an intersection of biblical holidays or biblical counting. Tonight is the 18th day of the Omer, Chai, right? But it also, the Jewish calendar is Yom Ha'atzmaut. It's Israel Independence Day. So tonight is kind of, we count a life, and we count to 18, which is the symbol of life, right? I want to share with you something that was just done this week by my friend Hillel Newman, who's the Consul General for the Western United States. He's a wonderful guy. He did this for us for JLTV, but you're going to see it before anybody else does right now. This is a greeting from our Consul General. So he doesn't control. He's not in charge of Texas. So he's not yours, guys, the Strollmans, but everywhere west of that, from New Mexico, Arizona, et cetera, Utah, that's part of his territory. But here it is.
Shalom to all the viewers of JLTV. My name is Hillel Newman, and I'm the Consul General of Israel in Los Angeles. Today, we celebrate a miracle, the 73rd Independence Day of the State of Israel. This has been a miraculous journey of the return of the Jewish people to their ancient homeland and re-establishing sovereignty in the Holy Land. Against all odds, the State of Israel not only survived, but Israel prospers. Israel is today a powerhouse and a global leader in innovation and ingenuity, and distributes aid worldwide. This is truly a miracle. It exemplifies the strength of human spirit. Today, let's all join together and celebrate this miracle. Thank you.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Short little message. We're putting it up on the Temple website and also on JLTV's website, but it gives us, again, a reminder of today, the 73rd birthday of Israel, and again, what Israel's accomplished in such a relatively short period of time, and in some cases during some of our lifetimes. Literally, some of us remember what it was like not to have an Israel. So this is truly amazing, and so tonight we celebrate Israel, and again, hope that this year will continue to be a great year for the Jewish people through the nation of Israel. And I just heard yesterday that vaccinated tour groups are going to be able to start going in May. So I don't really know what that means, other than it's a good sign that tour groups are soon going to be able to go. I don't know how many tour groups. I don't know what the nature of those tour groups are, but it was like the first indication that Israel's tourism is going to open up. But again, for people who,
Rabbi, are we still talking about going next year?
Yeah, for sure, in 2022. So, we felt kind of, it was probably not, there's a couple things. Number one, and we'll talk about it tonight because tonight's Torah portion is about quarantines, right?
Oh yeah.
I do. It's, of course, everyone's going to talk about it this year, how it relates to us, like it did last year. But I don't want to require people to be vaccinated to go on the trip. Now, again, I'm not saying not to be vaccinated. I'm encouraging people. That's not what I said. But I don't want to create a situation where people must be vaccinated in order to go on the trip, because quite frankly, I'm not going to enforce that. I'm not saying not to get vaccinated. I said it again, but I'm not going to tell people that they have to do something in order to go on the trip. Other than getting a passport, there is nothing that anybody has to do to go on a trip with us to Israel. I can't get into the requirements of what people will have to do to go on a trip. I can't do that. So just like technically speaking, I don't ask people's religious convictions or whatever when they go on a trip to Israel with us. We've had Christians, we've had people of all different backgrounds go on our trips, always. I never ask those questions, and quite frankly, it's not relevant to the trip. So whatever requirements that Israel is going to make on us by next year, my feeling is all of those things will be settled by then, and let's see, because I don't think Israel really knows what they're going to do and how they're going to enforce the vaccination. I've heard from that man you just saw, Hillel Newman, was one of the things that they were going to require was proof of insurance, that people have medical insurance that allows them to be hospitalized for COVID treatment if they contract the illness while they're on a trip. I cannot do that. I cannot in good conscience require that from people on a trip. I just can't. I can't enforce it. I can't be responsible for it. I don't want to be liable for it. So that's a nice way of saying I want to go when we don't have to worry about those kind of things. And I definitely don't want to be on the front line. I don't mind, by the way, I might go to, I don't think I'm going to, I have no plans. I would go to Israel maybe next month or the month after if I had to go there for something for the network or to film something. I would, if I had to do something there, I would do it. But I'm not going to take people that I'm responsible for in this situation yet.
Right. But hopefully next year, because Mary and I want to celebrate our 25th anniversary +2.
I love it. And I don't think there'll be any reason why this won't be able to happen. And I think given some of the things that we're working on and some of as I told people, we're doing the Israel 360. I think I showed some of the people, some of you got to see the promos on that. I'm going to post that, by the way. You know what? Maybe I'll post that link right now. I mean, I'm going to post the link and you can go and see it on your own.
What month are you thinking about, Rabbi Mark?
Well, it's interesting you say that because we're actually talking about 3 possibilities of maybe three trips next year. One in February, one in June, and maybe one in October, November. Let me tell you what we were talking.
You're limiting the amount of kids that can go to one time.
Yeah. Well, hopefully by then we're also not going to see that. I'll tell you but we again, this is what we're planning on. Let me just tell you the dates. I'll look for it later. I have too many emails about this going back and forth. I'm telling you something, honestly, just since the beginning of the year, I have about 25, 30 email. No, this strand alone has 19 back and forths on it. I'm working on this a lot is what I'm going to tell you. So I'm also, as I said, right now, what I will do is I'm going to post I posted Shai's tour of Yad Vashem last week, which was just, again, a 5-minute tour, but I'm going to post the link for this Israel 360. I definitely encourage you to watch it on the computer where you can actually use the 360, because as you go through it, you will be able to, I just put it up. You'll actually be able to use your computer and you'll be able to follow the link and literally pan around and see everything on that screen with your computer controlling it. You also, if you have Oculus goggles or some kinds of goggles, you'll be able to do that too.
Hi, Mike.
By the way, you know what? Let me just show you I'm going to show you literally 20 seconds of this. I'm just going to share you so you can see what I mean. And again, have some fun with it. This is just the promo for it, but I'm going to show you.
And I'm in Israel right now. We're at the Jaffa Gate in Jerusalem, where Herod the Great used to rule from, as his palace was right over there.
I'm doing this, by the way, and you can do it too.
We're about to embark on this amazing journey brought to you by JLTV as part of our attempt to make Israel accessible for everybody, everywhere. As a tour guide, I know how amazing it is to travel Israel, as I've been doing it for many years now. I've guided thousands of people through the country.
See that? That's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
In between. I know how much of a significant experience this can be. With everything going on, we wanted to make Israel more accessible for everybody who couldn't come. So that's what we're about to do. We're going to embark on this incredible journey in 360 throughout the entire country. wandering from side to side. Since this isn't 360, you can turn around and look the other way. And if you do, you'll see modern Jerusalem. So we're standing at a crazy, crazy spot. Now, being an ex-Israeli soldier, I know exactly how much significance this place holds. This is brought to you by Joel TV, so we hope you enjoy it. Join us for our next few chapters as we wander the country on this crazy journey. Thank you very much.
So that's a 360-degree tour that you can you can control yourself. So that's going to be, we're working on 5 chapters, five episodes. And you guys will be because you're here with me, you're the first people to know about it. You're the first people who will actually see what's happening with this. So it's one of the really good things we've been able to do. And we really obviously want people to have, as much of a connection to Israel, see as much of Israel as they can. And the fact that we can now do this from the comfort of your own home is absolutely amazing. And Shai is a great tour guide. He's the guy we're going to be working with when we go to Israel. So just so you know, these are the chapters. This is, you're the first people, aside from like a few people at the network, who know about this. We're going to be doing the development of Judaism, 1 episode. This one's going to be Jerusalem, all about Jerusalem. This is the borders of modern Israel, including going up to the border of Syria. We're going to go to every border: the border of Israel and Syria, the border of Israel and Lebanon, the Palestinian territories, and also again the Temple Mount. Then we're going to look at the coasts of Israel, the Red Sea, the Dead Sea, the Med Sea, as they say, the Red, Dead, and Med. We're going to see all those seas. Go to Eilat, the Dead Sea. Some of you have been with us on that trip. We went to Petra, where we went down to Eilat. And then the last one is going to be Herod the Great, where we're going to see some of the sites that Herod the Great built, which are some of the greatest sites in Israel, including the Temple Mount, which he built, what we call the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall. He built that. He built Masada. He built Caesarea. He built his funeral sepulcher at Herodian, which is now the modern West Bank. So these are all things that King Herod the Great built, and we're going to have a special tour of those. So with that, and with a lot of thinking about, again, how amazing Israel is, I want to start our class. And again, wish everyone a happy Yom HaAtzmaut. Please use this time in the next 24 hours or so to think about how lucky we are to live at a time when Israel has been reestablished. I can't stress it enough. It's changed the whole dynamic of American Jews, of worldwide Judaism. And it really has given us a whole different vantage point on which to understand who we are, understand our place as Jews, and not only given us a glimpse of historical sites that we have now access to that we never had access to, so that we can uncover our history, but it's also our future. And it gives us the ability to literally lay the groundwork for generations of Jews who will be able to, God willing, be safe, be secure, and use Israel as a launching point to bring life and learning and as we now know, benefit and health to the rest of the world, because so much of what is coming out of Israel today is some of the greatest medical technology. And every few months you hear about another discovery, another cure, something else that came out of Israel that's helping to make the world a better place. And even again, in partnership with the United States and with some of our research centers. And again, it's something we really should celebrate. So please, we have enough days where we talk about sad things, or we have, Yizkers, and we have Holocaust Remembrance Days, and we have sad days, but we need to really dance and celebrate with Israel. And I wish we could do that. I wish we could do that in person. So with that being said, let's jump in to what is a double portion tonight, Tazria and Metzora. And I as I said from the outset, there's a lot of people that are going to be talking about how this relates to our current situation, to a global pandemic, because this portion is about essentially diagnosing and quarantine. We use the word we use the word now almost every day in our lives, quarantining people who are sick and how to actually keep them safe. Now, I will tell you that as we read this, I want you to pay attention to the fact that unlike our current situation, what happens in the Bible and what happened through most of human history, rather than quarantining the healthy population, we generally would quarantine the ill. We would quarantine the people that were sick. And we understand that things have changed and things are different. But I want you to keep in mind how unusual it is in human history, in the human experience, for not the sick to be quarantined, but for the healthy to be quarantined. That's a different situation. And it's a paradigm that I want you to pay attention to here as we read this today, because we take it for granted that like what we're doing now is been done before. It really hasn't. You have to go back, obviously, to the Spanish flu. And even then, it wasn't enforced to kind of in the same ways that it is today. And again, I'm not commenting on whether that's good or bad. I will tell you, though, it's very unusual in human history. We are very, very careful, as you'll see from tonight's Torah portion, that we quarantine the people who are ill for the sake of everybody else in the community. And again, what does this do to us in the approach that we've taken today? So we finished last week with the Torah portion Shmini, which ended with a very interesting discussion of foods that were holy and not holy, or foods that were clean and unclean, and the fact that God wants us to eat certain. If we're going to eat animals, I should preface that if we are going to eat animals, that we can only eat certain animals. God doesn't want us to. God doesn't want us to take for granted the fact that there's probably animals that are not either healthy for us to eat, or at least not, bless you, not holy for us to eat. And that's why it finishes with distinguishing between the unclean and the clean, between the living things that may be eaten and the living things that may not be eaten. So we start up now. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, God spoke to Moses saying, speak to the Israelite people thus, Daber el bnei Yisrael, lemor. And then it says, Isha ki Tazria, when a woman at childbirth bears a male. That's where the word Tazria, what it comes from, Isha ki Tazria. So I always like to tell you where the name of the portion comes from. It comes from this word. Tazria means to give birth. And specifically, it says Vayalda Zachar, when she gives birth to a male child. So when she gives birth, it says, and by the way, I want to dwell on this, but the Hebrew word Tazria literally means, and that's why they translate it as childbirth. I don't want to, again, it's semantics, or maybe it's, again, maybe even redundancy. It says when a woman in childbirth bears a male. It could have just said when a woman bears or bears a male. It does say childbirth when she is. The word Tazria is what is the translation of the word Tazria as childbirth, and it means essentially pregnant or giving forth. The word Zara is seed, is actually the same word for seed is Zara. And so when she bears a male, she shall be unclean for 7 days. She shall be unclean as at the time of her menstrual infirmity. I don't know if infirmity is necessarily the best translation of the word menstruation, the nidah, but it is that she is in an unclean state, a tameh, which is, again, tahor, clean, tameh, unclean. That is not necessarily a definition of whether someone is physically, hygienically clean, which is why the word is not a great translation, and why they use the word menstrual infirmity. Well, I guess that's really kind of this translation here. But unclean here, tameh, it kind of connotes somebody who's in a spiritual state where they actually have to go to a mikvah in order to emerge into the community. It says, and so it's similar to when she's in menstruation, which again also teaches us that when a woman is After she's menstruated, she has 7 days that she needs to make sure that she's no longer menstruating before she, in the cases of family law, as we say in Judaism, that she's separated from her husband for those 7 days. There are people who think that the reason why these laws exist is to make sure that women would only have sex with their husbands during the main times of ovulation. I think it's a little different. It's a little deeper than that. I don't think it's only that. I think, again, what you'll see in this Torah portion, what we see in the Torah in other places, including the discussion of animals, is this idea that blood is powerful, that blood is life, and that coming into contact with blood, whether it's menstrual blood, postpartum blood, any type of blood from an animal, that the blood is something that is very powerful and has the powers we saw in the sacrifices. When we sprinkle blood on the altar, it actually doesn't impurify. It does the exact opposite. It makes it's required for the altar to be used. So this idea that blood is dirty or blood is unclean, that's not it. Because otherwise, why would the priest that we just read about sprinkle the altar with blood and put blood on the corners, on the horns of the altar? It's clearly powerful. It's the power of blood. And I think there's this recognition that this woman, after she gives birth, is now, again, she now is bearing forth not just life, but also blood, a symbol of life, if you will. It says on the 8th day of the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. We know that already. We've heard that. And it says she shall remain in a state of blood purification for 33 days. She shall not touch any consecrated thing nor enter the sanctuary until her period of purification is completed. So that's different than being in a state of tameh, that she's also in a state of, what the opposite word is here, tahara, demei tahara, that she's in blood purification for 33 days. So a month plus 10%. Yeah.
I find it interesting that they use the word sanctuary.
Well, the word that's used here is mikdash, right? So it's not the Mishkan. It doesn't say the tabernacle. So it is an interesting word. I think it's interesting you point out. And yeah, it seems as though, again, there's either a recognition that this is the temple, like they've stepped back and like this is the temple, or one can make the argument that anything that is any place, because it says Bechol Kodesh, in anything that's consecrated, which again is the same word as mikdash, right? It's the holiness. That she's not allowed to touch anything that's holy. So it's not just the sanctuary or the building itself, but it's anything that is needed for one could guess.
But it says not touch any concentrated thing, nor enter the sanctuary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's almost, obviously they're telling us that this was written many, many, many years later.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think that it does kind of give away the fact that it doesn't say that tabernacle. They don't have the Beit HaMikdash yet. I mean, it doesn't say Beit HaMikdash. I don't want to dwell on the fact it doesn't use that word, but I think you're right. I think it does kind of give away the fact that maybe they're saying, like they're projecting backwards, but did they just kind of slip up by not saying the word Mishkan? I don't know. Let's keep an eye. I think it's a very good point, because it doesn't say Mishkan. It doesn't. It says Mikdash. And again, they could have said Mishkan and then interpreted from that forward that it went to the temple. So anything that was required in the temporary tabernacle and the movable sanctuary would also be required in the Beit HaMikdash, in the building that was the temple in Jerusalem. Yeah. So again, she's in a state of tameh, if you will, but this is the Yemei Tahara, the days of purification. So after 33 days, now, of course, what about a girl? And here, everything gets doubled. If she bears a female, she'll be unclean 2 weeks as during her menstruation, and she will remain in a state of blood purification for 66 days. So they double both the time that she's in a state of tameh and also the state where she can't touch anything that's holy. So again, it seems to be that having a girl, having a female daughter is redundant, but female birth doubles the time, because essentially that daughter will also one day be a source of life, a source of blood, if you will. And so there's like a cumulative effect of saying the daughter and now this daughter. Now I wonder if they had twins, girl twins, whether they have to double that again. It doesn't say that, but and again, it's not being silly about how long somebody was impure for. But people have said, wow, that doesn't seem fair that a daughter person is rendered, kind of in this weird like state of, well, she's not ready to come back in yet if it's a girl. But it was this kind of understanding that, yeah, but it's doubly, you can make the argument it's doubly powerful or doubly holy or doubly, potentially the potential there is enormous with that kind of strength or that kind of power. So it's kind of interesting that is the, that's the takeaway from that. And what happens for either one? On the completion of her blood purification for either son or daughter, she shall bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, and a pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering. So she brings, the mother brings two things, both a offering of kind of, if you will, her completion, her re-entry offering, and then also a sin offering, which you're wondering, like, why would they use a sin offering? Why does she need a chatat? Why does she need a sin offering? She didn't do anything wrong. And it's kind of an interesting, like, I can understand why she brings maybe an offering of thanks, right? Maybe it's an offering of thank you that I'm healthy. And I think there's this understanding here, though, that, and it's a minor offering. It's the smallest offering you could make of an animal, but there does seem to be this understanding that when somebody comes into the temple for even something that they're doing for good, let's just make sure that they come in clean and they leave, that they're okay. So we're not assuming they did anything wrong, bad, but just in case, let's make sure that they have a sin offering. And let's make sure that they're covered on that level too. So there's this little extra piece of this too, which you're like, it doesn't seem like fair to assume that she sinned because she's bringing it. But again, you're coming into the temple. He shall offer it before the Lord and make expiation on her behalf. So she shall be clean from her flow of blood. Such are the rituals concerning her who bears a child, male or female. If, however, her means do not suffice for a sheep, she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. The priest shall make expiation on her behalf, and she shall be clean. And so it tells us a little something here too. If she can't afford to do that first offering in the form of a sheep, she can bring another, bird. She can bring 2 birds, one of that, that first offering, that kind of cleansing offering, and then the other one for the sin offering. So she does get, shouldn't be cost prohibitive for her to do that. So she gets to be essentially clean. So this is the law of birth ritual, if you will. By the way, we can make an argument. I do want to just pause right here as before we get into this next section. One can make the argument that we have interesting rituals. And I'm saying this now because my cousins in Arizona just had a baby boy, which was very exciting. It was exciting for our family to have obviously a new life. And so his name is Levi Sam. He is, so he was born yesterday. yesterday, Monday. So they just posted a picture on Facebook. They just finally, the family just put, we got a picture Monday. It was late Monday night. So, and I was just joking with the father, my cousin, that, it's not official, right, until it's on Facebook. the baby is now official. And people knew, and, they had told friends and the word had gone out. And interestingly enough, you're technically, by the way, not supposed to invite people to a bris. It's considered like, it's not the custom. You don't get a bris invitation. I mean, you can, don't get me wrong. It's not against the law to do it, but the general tradition, custom, if you will, is not to send an invitation. You can invite people, you can call them. People should ask you when the bris is, but you're not supposed to actually send an invite. It's just been that way for a long time. It's partly superstitious. It's partly, just the custom, if you will. So I thought about it though, which is we really don't have rituals though for the parent when they have a child. And what's interesting about the Torah is it recognizes that having a child is a very meaningful experience for a parent. It's traumatic, it's powerful, it's emotional, but it does mean something to the parent. Now, of course, the Torah tells us again that we do a bris for the boy on 8th day and all that stuff. That's for the boy. But what about the parents? And the Torah actually says that these offerings are for the parent. It's not about the kid. It's about the parent. The parent, in this case, the mother, needs to have some type of ritual in order to recognize this change in her life. And I really do think that rituals have the power of transforming moments that we have into not only milestones, but to actually recognize the fact that we're different than we were the day before this happened. And this is something that our modern society doesn't recognize. I mean, we do silly things like, again, posting it on Facebook, which is kind of the way of publicly recognizing it. But I think that's missing the point, because it's not about other people recognizing it. I mean, I guess that's a little part of it. People would see the sacrifices. It wasn't like you just did it by yourself. But I think people need to have a ritual that's expressive of their thanks, their recognition, I want to tell you this, and I don't want to make this sound, I don't want this to come out the wrong way. In the ancient world, and actually up until recently, really, we take it for granted, having a child was a brush with death. So many women died during childbirth. And we almost take it for granted today because thankfully it doesn't happen. But for so long, it was such a vulnerable time for in a woman's life, that her life was hanging in the balance, that I just don't think we don't think about that aspect of it, thankfully, anymore. Because normally the woman's going to pull, it looks like 99, whatever the rate of it's so rare for somebody to die in childbirth, then we don't think about it. But because we don't think about it, and because we don't recognize it, we don't recognize the rest of the change that happens to a woman who's just given birth. And the Torah does recognize it. The Torah does say, hey, this is really, really powerful that this woman just gave birth. It's a miracle. It's not just a miracle that she survived, which again, we don't think about anymore, but it's a miracle that there's a new life here that didn't exist the day before. So I don't think we really recognize the significance of this as much anymore. And it is very, very powerful. And I think for all of our promotion of gender equality and all of our promotion of, again, a hope for equal pay and all those other things, which are really important, we don't actually recognize how powerful it is for a woman to have a baby anymore. And I think that that's a terrible thing. I think that really doesn't first of all recognize the power that a woman has. And I think it actually hurts I think it hurts women. And I think that and again, I can't, who knows how to qualify this statement I'm about to make, but I do think it leads to a higher probably incidence of postpartum depression, because I don't think women have ever really gotten in our modern world the recognition that what they just did was a miracle. And I think sometimes people are like, well, do you understand what I just lived through? And I think that's it's a terrible thing. And by the way, I think it also, because we don't do it anymore in our world, and it doesn't really talk about it in the Torah completely, but I think we kind of understand that this happened, that when women also went through menopause, that was also recognized as a spiritual moment, as a special time. And I don't think we recognize that as much anymore. And I think there's also a terrible loss there, in that women don't mark that and they feel uncomfortable about it, or have all the other feelings that they have about it, but that they don't have a chance to recognize it and feel and come to terms with that new stage of their life. So I think it's, for all of our modernity and equality, I think we're really missing the opportunity to recognize those milestones in women and in a woman's life. So obviously I think about that a little bit more than most men, because I'm surrounded by women. So I definitely think about this more, but than some people. But I wonder sometimes if we're missing the boat on recognizing these special moments in a woman's life. So let's talk about skin disease.
Okay.
Let's move off. Let's move off the amazing miracle of what women can do to what happens when we get sick with skin disease. And that's actually most of what we're going to be reading now. And so we're going to move a little faster. And I will tell you, this is in some ways, a difficult thing to read about, because it's a lot about skin stuff. But again, it does show that our ancestors understood that medical care was a holy act, and that people who were doctors, people who were involved in medical care, were in the ancient world, oftentimes they were the priests themselves. But this is a very high calling. So again, God spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when a person has on the skin of his body a swelling, a rash, or a discoloration, and it develops into a scaly affection on the skin of the body, it shall be reported to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons the priests. The priest shall examine the affection on the skin of the body. If hair in the affected patches turn white, and the affection appears to be deeper than the skin of the body, it is a leprous affection. When the priest sees it, he shall pronounce him unclean. And again, the same word that we had before, tameh. In this case, it's pretty clear that this is a hygienic issue. This is a medical issue, that this is something that is not a normal issue, if you will, in the sense that this is, kind of an aberration. This definitely seems to be the case here. Again, we use the word for tzarat. You're going to see throughout the word leprosy. It is not leprosy. It is not leprous. Everybody knows it's not leprosy. We always give this disclaimer. It is not leprosy. It is not Hansen's disease. But the word has been used for thousands of years since we came into contact with leprosy. How do we know it's not leprosy? Because there was no leprosy in the biblical land of Israel. Leprosy did not come into the land of Israel until the time of Alexander the Great. Alexander's Greek armies brought leprosy with them about 700 years after this period, maybe 500 years at the earliest. So it is not leprosy.
Huh, I didn't know that.
It was not there. So everybody knows it. We know it. The problem is the King James Bible used leprosy, and ever since it stuck, and it's not. And everyone who knows skin diseases and medical stuff very well knows that it's not by the description of what is happening here. What is it? It's not one thing. So let me make it very clear. What the things that are being described here are not one thing. They are skin diseases that definitely seem to be infectious based on the descriptions. They definitely seem to, in some cases, there also seem to be able to spread cross contact through maybe even sheets, garments, maybe even it seems like walls. So it seems like some of what's being described here in some cases is like a mildew or fungus. There are fungi that grow on, without being disgusting, grow on people, but we don't think it's one thing. I mean, if it is one thing, we don't have this one thing, and it doesn't seem to be one thing. It seems to be many things that can spread, and that people were very careful. They didn't want it to spread, and this is how they stop it. First, by identification. If it's a white discoloration on the skin of his body, which does not appear to be deeper than the skin and the hair, and it does not turn white, the priest shall isolate the affected person for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest shall examine him. And if the affection has remained unchanged in color and the disease has not spread on the skin, the priest shall isolate him another 7 days. And on the 7th day, the priest shall examine him again. If the affection has faded and has not spread on the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is a rash. He shall wash his clothes and he shall be clean. So it's very important. If the skin disease is not spreading, if it doesn't look deep, if it's not changing the color of the hair, hey, we watch it 7 days, check it out, come back. It's got to still stay quarantined another 7 days. If that's okay, and if it's now going down, it actually says if it's going down, then after that next period, after the 14 days, he can re-enter the community, which again, it means that he still has the rash, but it's not sa'arat. It's not anything other than the rash. It's not something that they have to worry about spreading. Okay. But if the rash should spread on the skin after he has presented himself to the priest and then pronounced clean, he shall present himself again to the priest. And if the priest sees that the rash has spread on the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy. When a person, so again, if it's not getting better, even if after the first 7 days he looked better, if he comes back after the next 7 days and it's still spreading, he's got it. So sometimes, again, it could be slow developing, and if it's not going down, then we got a problem. Then it says, when a person has a scaly affection, it shall be reported to the priest. If the priest finds on the skin a white swelling, which has turned some hair white, with a patch of undiscolored flesh in the swelling, it is chronic leprosy on the skin of the body, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. He need not isolate him, for he is unclean. Now that's a little confusing, right?
Yeah.
So what's going on there? Well, the word that they use to describe this is this is tsarat noshenet, which they translated as chronic, which means that it is not the kind of skin disease that is, and you're not going to hear me, by the way, say leprosy. I will not fall into that trap of using the word leprosy. I just used it, but I said I wasn't going to. I'm only saying what I'm not going to say. But anyways, it's the skin disease that it's a skin disease that is chronic. What's interesting about it is they're not worried about it being contagious anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting about this is they recognize in some cases that people have this chronic disease, but it's not spreading. It's not contagious, right? And he's not going to give it to somebody else, so he doesn't have to be segregated. And I really do want to use that word segregated instead of quarantine. And I'll get to that in a second. If the eruption spreads out over the skin so that it covers all the skin of the affected person from head to foot, wherever the priest can see. If the priest sees the eruption has covered the whole body, he shall pronounce the person clean. He is clean, for he is turned all white. But as soon as the undiscolored flesh appears in it, he shall be unclean. When the priest sees the undiscolored flesh, he shall pronounce him unclean. The undiscolored flesh is unclean. It is leprosy. But if the undiscolored flesh again turns white, he shall come to the priest, and the priest shall examine him. If the affection has turned white, the priest shall pronounce the affected person clean. He is clean. So let's pause there with what they're describing there. And again, this is why it seems like they're describing different types of skin diseases, because this one does seem to be maybe more of something like a disease where the way that you can tell whether it's spreading or not is whether there are discolorations on the person. If the discolorations stop, then it's run its course, is what they're essentially saying. And so it's kind of a weird situation of, is the person literally in a contagious situation? Which is interesting, because what they seem to be most concerned about, I mean, it doesn't surprise you, is they're actually considering most the contagion, how contagious the person is. So what really is being discussed here is segregating someone who's sick from the rest of the population and deciding when and how long that person has to be segregated for. And the idea, of course, is that you segregate the person as long as they're contagious. If they're no longer contagious, they're clean, and then they can come into contact with people. It's the bottom line.
And some of the skin diseases like eczema and psoriasis, they're not catching, they're not contagious from one person to another. It's an internal problem.
Correct. And it seems as though that's maybe what some of these diseases are. Seems to be a little bit like eczema, especially this next one. When inflammation appears on the skin of one's body and it heals, and a white swelling or white discoloration streaked with red develops where the inflammation was, he shall present himself to the priest. If the priest finds that it appears lower than the rest of the skin and that the hair in it has turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous affection that has broken out in the inflammation. But if the priest finds that there's no white hair in it and it is not lower than the rest of the skin and it is faded, the priest shall isolate him 7 days. And if it should spread to the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is an affection. But if the discoloration remains stationary, not having spread, it is a scar of the inflammation. The priest shall pronounce him clean. So again, it seems like in some cases that what they're describing, if it's not eczema, it's very similar in the sense that there's skin diseases which manifest themselves, and then they don't spread beyond this one area. And again, depending on whether it's discoloring the hairs on the body, may not be, again, something that we have to worry about being contagious. And I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that psoriasis did exist in the ancient world at this point, was already been kind of identified by doctors. And I think it might have already been in the land of Israel, but I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that some of this could be like a psoriasis type situation. So again, those things are they seem to be more than one thing. Now we're going to see this next thing. It's clearly something different. When the skin of one's body sustains a burn by fire, and the patch from the burn is a discoloration, either white, streaked, or red or white, the priest shall examine it. If some hair has turned white in the discoloration, which itself appears to go deeper than the skin, it is leprosy that is broken out in the burn. The priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous affection. But if the priest finds that there is no white hair in the discoloration and that it is not lower than the rest of the skin and is faded, the priest shall isolate him for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest shall examine him. If it is spread in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous affection. But if the discoloration has remained stationary, not having spread on the skin, and it is faded, it is swelling from the burn, the priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is a scar of the burn. So there it's clear that the way that the person got this affection was through fire. Now it could be that fire that because there was an infection, there was some type of bacterial infection from the fire that it allowed for this skin disease to grow there. But they're also saying, yeah, sometimes it's just the scar from the fire. And so in this case, it's very clear where this thing came from. It came from a fire. It didn't come necessarily from any type of affection, any type of tzarat. We'll use the Hebrew word here, the skin disease. So that is like a whole nother possibility. And again, not one that's necessarily even a medical related. It's an accident, or it's a situational. It's a fire. Now, if a woman or a man or woman has an affection on the head or in the beard, the priest shall examine the affection. If it appears to go deeper than the skin and there is thin yellow hair in it, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a scald, a scaly eruption in the hair or beard. But if the priest finds that the scald affection does not appear to go deeper than the skin, that there is no black hair in it, the priest shall isolate the person with the scald affection for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest shall examine the affection. If the scald has not spread and no yellow hair has appeared in it, and the scald does not appear to go deeper than the skin, the person with the scald shall shave himself, but without shaving the scald, the priest shall isolate him for another 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest shall examine the scald. If the scald has not spread on the skin and does not appear to go deeper than the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. He shall wash his clothes and he shall be clean. So again, let's finish this part. If, however, the scald should spread on the skin and after he's pronounced clean, the priest shall examine him. If the scald has spread on the skin, the priest need not look for yellow hair. He's unclean. But if the scald has remained unchanged in color and the black hair has grown in it, the scald is healed, he is clean, the priest shall pronounce him clean. So this is, another, maybe a whole nother type of disease, or again, maybe the way this tzarat affected the hair, beard, areas where, again, it was usually covered by hair. This is, again, seems to be, how do we make sure that it's not spreading? How do we make sure that this is a situation where it's been contained in this part of a person? Again, in this case, of course, they have to shave the area around it. They look at the area, make sure that it's not spreading into other parts of the body. And again, making sure that it's not contagious. Next, if a man or a woman has the skin of the body streaked with white discolorations, and the priest sees the discolorations on the skin of the body are of dull white, it is a tetter broken out on the skin. He is clean. Okay, so this definitely seems to be something, again, it's not the skin disease, right? It's not tzarat. And they basically say that right away. So either it's some type of eczema, something that's causing discolorations, white discolorations. But it's definitely not this disease. If a man loses the hair on his head and becomes bald, he's clean. Okay, well, that's good to know, because that happens to most men. They go through part of their lives where they start losing their hair a little bit, right? And some earlier than others. And what happens, of course, is that's normal male pattern baldness. It's okay. if he loses the hair on the front part of his head and becomes bald at the forehead, he's clean. Well, that's good to know. I'm very glad that as I, again, look at myself in the mirror, that I am clean. I'm losing that hair on the front part of my head, but it still means I'm clean. But if a white affection streaked with red appears on the bald part in the front or at the back of the head, it is a scaly eruption that is spreading over the bald part in the front or the back of the head. The priest shall examine him. If the swollen affection on the bald part in the front or at the back is white streaked with red, like the leprosy of body skin in appearance, that man is leprous. He's unclean. The priest shall pronounce him unclean. He has the affection on his head. So again, people could get this just on their head, and it's not obviously something that people wanted to have to think about getting it on their head, but yeah, it could happen that somebody had this tzara'at on their head, and whether or not they're losing their hair, they can still get it. Not great that you're losing your hair and you're getting tzara'at, but it happens. As for the person with the leprous affection, his clothes shall be rent, his head shall be left bare, and he shall cover his upper lip, and he shall call out, unclean, unclean. Now, this seems to be horrific, because this is now the person he's got to announce himself, and kind of interesting that he kind of wears a mask, or at least covers his lip, covers his upper lip, and says unclean, unclean, tameh, tameh. Uses the word. It does use the word there twice. So his clothes are rent. Same thing we do at a funeral. We cut our garments, and there's a very clear outward sign that this person is sick. Not because you can see that from walking past them, but they're wearing ripped clothes. Their head is uncovered, meaning they're not wearing a yarmulke or a hat, not wearing anything on their head. Whatever they had on their head, they're not wearing it now. And they're walking around like this. And on top of it, you not only see it, but you hear it, because they're saying unclean, unclean. People actually had to identify themselves so that people could stay away from them. Again, we read that they're actually put in a separate area. But until they're in that separate area, you can't just have the people walking around like nothing happened. And so people knew to stay away from them. And, for whatever reason, if they're ever coming into contact with people, they had to identify themselves for the sake of the community. And here's what it says. He shall be unclean as long as the disease is on him. Being unclean, he shall dwell apart. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. So he doesn't live with everybody else. Now, look, the Bible later on has a description of these places where people lived outside of the city. And actually, the Haftarah, the section from the prophets that we read this week, is one such story of how one of these groups of tzara'at camps ends up becoming heroic. They end up actually helping the other people inside the town, because they're the first to see that an enemy siege is over. Now, you can imagine how comfortable you'd be if you were in an enemy siege and you're outside of town. You're on the outside, meaning like everyone else is being protected inside the town, and you, because you've got tzara'at, don't get to come into the town, and they're surrounded by your enemies. Not a great place to be. That's the story we read in the Haftarah. Those people, though, are the ones who actually go in or not go in, but shout out to the people in the town, everything's okay. You can come out. So they become the heroes of the story. But yeah, folks, it was not a good situation to be one of those people that again, I don't like to use the word quarantine, but again, segregated from the community. We've talked about this before. The word quarantine literally means 40 days. It comes from, again, the way the Italians dealt with an outbreak of plague in Italy during the Middle Ages. But the idea of quarantining being essentially in reverse, where everyone's quarantined and then the people who are sick are essentially not, look, the Torah knows it's a slippery slope. If you identify people that are sick, you are to some extent stripping them of their dignity or their ability to feel comfortable in public. On the other hand, the goal is not in this case to maintain people's dignity or privacy, but to protect the community. It's a very different idea than what we have in our modern world. Because again, one of the challenges we have in this country is that we're so independent. And as I've mentioned before, the Torah really does stress independence, but also it stresses interdependence, that we have a dependency on each other and on our community and on the fact that we live by certain rules together. And we don't have that so much anymore. I was talking to somebody recently about Israel and the vaccination program in Israel. How did Israel get everyone vaccinated so fast? So somebody said it's because Israel ordered everyone to be vaccinated. Israel didn't order everyone to be vaccinated. They didn't arrest people who weren't vaccinated. They didn't force people into vaccination centers. It didn't happen. What Israel told people is, in order for everybody to be able to go back to normal, everyone has to be vaccinated. And so what they did is they told people, this is what we're doing. And the people responded. And people said, well, how? Why? Americans couldn't understand that. And the answer I said is this: look, if you're a man in Israel, and most women, you spent 2 years of your life in the army. You spent your 2 years of your life understanding that you're part of a community that depends on you. And if people tell you this is what we need to do in order for us to go back to normal, you do it. You don't think it's a joke. You just do it because, again, you have to do it for the sake of everybody else, all of your neighbors. And so that's why Israel was able to effectively get everybody vaccinated so fast, because they, again, are not dealing with a situation where you have to convince people of their interdependence and the fact that people are relying on you to do your job. And again, in this case, in the Torah, we're talking about people who had to be segregated from the rest of the community in order for the rest of the community to be holy, to be healed, to be healthy. Without a doubt, Judaism sees this as a requirement. It's not just a mitzvah. It's literally like society falls apart if people don't protect each other.
And is there historical records of the Jewish communities surviving better through infections than other communities that didn't go to their priests and be diagnosed and be separated and segregated?
Joyce, you raise a good point, because one of the theories of why there was so much anti-Semitism during the Middle Ages is because we didn't have the same death rates during the Black Plague. That's the theory. It's not been proven. I mean, there are theories that the death rate in the Jewish community was pretty high as well. But the idea that Jews were, look, the contemporary records seem to indicate that Jews did not die in the same amount. And so there was jealousy and aggravation and anger and superstitions about the fact that Jews were poisoning people because they weren't getting sick and everyone else was getting sick. All of those factors do seem to, it hasn't been proven because we don't have accurate,
right.
The estimates of bubonic plague are anywhere from 3/4 of the population of Europe to a third of the, it's just wildly different numbers. But I will tell you that against that backdrop, I tend to think that there's probably some truth to the idea that because Jews had lower rates than they probably did elicit anti-Semitism because of it. It just makes sense to me.
Yes, it does. To me too.
It's like, why argue it when like common sense will tell you that that's probably what happened in a highly superstitious and ignorant society, that they looked at Jews and said, why are they still healthy? Especially again, given the fact that there was already a backdrop of anti-Semitism being spread at that time by the church. So I think it makes sense. I mean, call me crazy for stating the obvious, but I think that that's the case. And it might have been that in some cases the Jewish community did die in the same numbers. I mean, it could be that really did happen, but did it happen?
And for cleanliness would have them have a higher survival rate.
Correct. And that's why I just think, look, just common sense tells me that that's what happened. So again, I think we'll never maybe know for certain unless we go back in a time machine, but I definitely don't want to go back in a time machine to the 15th century to watch the bubonic plague spread across Europe. But I do want to tell you, it makes a lot of sense. And given what happened at other, in other times and other places, I think it's pretty safe. It's a pretty safe bet. Anyways, folks, I do just kind of keep that in mind as we read this, that probably did have an effect on Jewish attempts at staying clean in other times. And I guarantee you rabbis during the Middle Ages read the Torah for guidance and said, you know what, when we see a household or we see a group of the city that's being affected, let's use the Torah as a guide and stay away from those communities, stay away from those people. It just makes sense. I just,
it does.
Why fight that like impulse to say, no, they read the Torah. We read the Torah. They read the Torah. They knew it. So next we get into some weird stuff that has to do with the fact that, again, this disease or some diseases seem to be more like a fungus or some kind of mildew or mold that gets into fabric. When an eruptive infection occurs in cloth of wool or linen fabric, in the warp or in the woof of the linen or the wool, or in the skin or in anything made of skin, if the affection in this cloth or the skin, in the warp or the woof of, or in any of the article of skin is streaky green or red, it is an eruptive affection. It shall be shown to the priest. And again, the word eruptive affection is the same thing here. They didn't translate it as leprosy, but again, it's the word sarat. And the priest, after examining the affection, shall isolate the affected article for 7 days. On the 7th day, he shall examine the affection. If the affection is spread in the cloth, whether in the warp or woof, in the skin, or for whatever purpose the skin may be used, the affection is a malignant eruption. It is unclean. So if it's spreading, it's unclean. The cloth, whether warp or woof or in wool or linen or in any article of skin in which the affection is found, shall be burned. It is a malignant eruption. It shall be consumed by fire. But, which again, probably is a good way of getting rid of that, right? But if the priest sees the affection in the cloth, whether in the warp or in the woof or in any article of skin has not spread, the priest shall order the affected article washed, and he shall isolate it for another 7 days. And if after the affected article has been washed, the priest sees that the affection has not changed color and it is not spread, it is unclean. It shall be consumed in fire. It is a fret, whether on its inner side or its an outer side. But if the priest sees that the affected part after it has been washed is faded, he shall tear it out of the cloth or skin, whether in the warp or woof. And if it occurs again in the cloth, whether in the warp or woof, or in any article of skin, it is a wild growth. The affected article shall be consumed in fire. If, however, the affection disappears from the cloth, warp or woof, or from any article of skin that has been washed, it shall be washed again. It shall be clean. Such is the procedure for eruptive affections of cloth, woolen, or linen, in warp or woof, or in any article of skin, for pronouncing it clean or unclean. Now you could ask yourselves, like, why bother? If it's in the garment, just toss it out. It's because they didn't have that kind of money, folks. They did not have the ability just to throw out everything that they had. And so they really did try not to destroy things if they didn't have to. So again, it's not a matter of being cheap. It's just they didn't have the kind of disposable products that we have today, where we don't even think about destroying things if they appear to have gone bad or be in a bad situation. These things are not, again, destroyed unless they absolutely have to. And again, if they have to, if the disease seems to be spreading, if this affection continues to grow in it is spreading. So that is the end of Tazria. And so if we only have a year where we're reading the portion not in its doubled up form, which we are this year, we're reading it at Tazria Metzora. We continue, and again, you can see that the ideas are continuing into this next portion. And so we're going to be reading a little bit more of this stuff, which again, Metzora has it as root in the word right here. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, this is the ritual for the leper at the time he is cleansed. So again, here, the word Metzora, appears in the second verse here in the fourth word. And this, it says the Torah HaMetzora. This is the Torah, the law, in this case, the ritual, he translated it, for a leopard at the time he is to be cleansed, when it has been reported to the priest. So the priest shall go outside the camp. If the priest sees the leper has been healed of his scaly affection, the priest shall order 2 live clean birds, cedar wood, crimson stuff, and hyssop, to be brought for him who is to be cleansed. So we just read, and again, this is why there's a break here, why there could be a new break. Now, what do we do when the person needs to be cleaned? What is the procedure? So things are okay now. So now what do you do? Well, there is definitely a procedure, a ritual, a way of getting someone back into the community and feel not just physically healed, but spiritually healed too. The priest shall order one of the birds slaughtered over fresh water in an earthen vessel. And he shall take the live bird along with the cedar wood and the crimson stuff, which again is the translation for tolat. It's something made of something that was red, and the hyssop, and dip them together with the live bird in the blood of the bird that was slaughtered over the fresh water. So a bird that's already kind of like been bled out, if you will, is then put on a live bird with the water and this other stuff. You shall sprinkle it 7 times on him who is to be cleansed of the eruption, and cleanse him. And he shall set the live bird free in the open country. So the ritual requires 2 birds, essentially. One that's slaughtered, one that's, if you will, the expiation, and then one that is sent away, which reminds us a lot of the sin of the goat of Azazel, which we're about to read in next week's portion. What do we do with the goat, again, that we send out into the wilderness or out to Azazel, which we read about the priest will do every Yom Kippur, or after, as we just read in Shmini last week, the priests have a horrible situation where a priest dies while he's doing his priestly duties. Wow. Here you go. One bird killed and the other bird set free. Again, kind of a recognition that a person has lived through a traumatic experience. And to some extent, when you see this bird being released, it's, I think, kind of symbolic of the person being released back. Wouldn't it be interesting if we had I don't want to jump ahead of ourselves, but wouldn't it be interesting if we have some type of feeling of maybe doing a ritual when, God willing, soon we get to go out and not worry about the restrictions that we have to live under now? How will we mark that transition back as individuals? I mean, as a society too. But Could be that we're releasing lots of pigeons, birds.
And we could take off our masks and throw them away.
Maybe. I think there's something to be said for feeling the restriction is gone, feeling unbound, and maybe again, the mask to some extent is a feeling of being bound. But also this feeling of being released back out into the world. And so the bird was to some extent set free as a symbol of that. It's kind of a nice idea of feeling free again, being able to travel, being able to be free as a bird. We still use that word, don't we? Free as a bird. So the one to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, shave his hair, off all his hair, and bathe in water. Then he shall be clean. After that, he may enter the camp, but he must remain outside his tent 7 days. On the 7th day, he shall shave off all his hair of head, beard, and eyebrows. When he has shaved off all his hair, he shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water. Then he shall be clean. Wow. So, that's a pretty deep shave. That's not just his beard. It's not just his hair. It says his eyebrows.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, it doesn't say all. It doesn't say, it says all his hair, but then it says his head, his beard, his eyebrows. It doesn't say he has to shave his chest, his back, his lower parts. It doesn't leg, whatever. It doesn't say that. I mean, one could say that's the assumption, but it doesn't say that because it says what hair he does shave: his head, his beard, his eyebrows. Essentially, the hair on his face, the top of his head, not just his face, his head, whatever you want to say. So what's interesting about that, of course, is that what seems to be implied by this is that people would see this person and know that they had gone through this healing. Mm-hmm. Because, as much as people in those days maybe shaved their beards, maybe then less likely shaved their hair, they didn't shave their eyebrows. That was not normal type of thing. And it definitely would have drawn people's attention to you. So you can always wear a hat. Maybe not everyone had a beard. Definitely seemed to be, at least in ancient Israel, more of the norm in the biblical period. Every depiction of an Israelite we have from the ancient world is bearded, by the way. It's interesting. And by the way, if you're going to say, where do they don't have pictures? They don't have pictures. They do have, as we have from the library from Nimrud in modern day Iraq, and in pictorial carvings of what Israelites and Jews look like, which we have from 2,500 years ago. You can see them in the British Museum in London, that all of them have hair on their face. All of them are bearded. So it does seem like that would have been normal to be bearded. So that's already not. To be shaved, definitely. And then again, to have your eyebrows shaved, there's no way people wouldn't notice that. So again, as people would grow their hair back, they would be a kind of reemerging back into society as their hair came back. But
So
no question people knew.
if there was a community-wide infestation of lice, and those that were infested with lice shaved all the hair that was visible, they could be noticed and isolated from.
That's a very good point too, right? Is that it would stop the spread of anything that was borne by remember, lice is, it's an insect. It's a
right.
living organism that would jump from hair. So yeah, absolutely. It would definitely stop the ability for that type of disease to spread. There's no question though that this renders the person very dramatically obvious, right? And there is this, one wonders, how would this not be humiliating for people to be walking around in this state of being shorn, I will tell you that it's hard to imagine this not having an emotional effect on people. But again, you can make the argument it was so that people would maybe recognize that, this is a serious deal. I mean, this is something that, this is something that we're definitely trying to root out from our community, and somebody's on the rebound. They're on the way back from their contact with this disease. But yeah, I mean, must have had a huge impact on people to be coming back from this. But I do want to make this very clear. If in the ancient world, if you were declared leprous, especially again, once leprosy didn't enter that area, folks, you never came back into the community. You were done. There was no, we'll let them back in a couple of years or in whatever. No, you were done. You never came back into the community. You were not allowed back into the city. You were not allowed back into people's homes. So as much as you'd go, wow, that seems kind of cruel. Yeah, because they didn't know how to deal with contagious disease. They didn't understand about bacteria. But they did know that there was contagious diseases. And the only way to really stop them is from isolating and segregating people. Now, I will tell you, there's another possibility that happened in the ancient world. They simply killed the people who were sick. And nowhere here does it say anywhere you kill the person who's sick. In the ancient world, my friends,
they did.
There were people who literally looked at someone who was sick and said, we're killing that person. I'm sorry that's your dad, your son, whatever. He's sick. We got to kill him. It's for the good of the community. And there was a utilitarian motive for it. But my friends, this was done. We know about it. Kill the person. Nowhere here in the Torah does it say you hurt the person. There's no weird draining of blood from them or rituals of cutting off the limbs or cutting off even the affected areas. No. The stuff healed. You gave it time to heal. If it didn't heal, the person was kept in a outside. It was segregated. But they're not killed. They're not even maimed. It doesn't say you cut off their arms if they have it on their arm. I don't want to say that this is like, that was the norm. Somebody's got an infection of their arm, cut it off. I'm just telling you, this was the norm. This was the abnormal thing, what the Jewish people were trying to do, which is to try to keep people safe on the one hand, do whatever we can to keep the community safe. But on the other hand, let's not overreact and let's not hurt people. Something to think about. On the 8th day, you shall take 2 male lambs without blemish, one ewe lamb in the first year without blemish, 3/10 of a measure of choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering, and one log, which is actually the Hebrew word, it's a measurement, a liquid measurement of oil. They shall be presented before the Lord with a man to be cleansed at the entrance of the tent of meeting by the priest who performs the cleansing. The priest shall take one of the male lambs and offer it with the log of oil as a guilt offering, and he shall elevate them as an elevation offering before the Lord. So again, another guilt offering. Here it actually says guilt offering, not a sin offering. It says asham, so it's a little different. than the guilt offering that we read about at the beginning with the women. The lamb shall be slaughtered at the spot in the sacred area where the sin offering and the burnt offering are slaughtered. For the guilt offering, like the sin offering, goes to the priest. It is most holy. The priest shall take some of the blood of the guilt offering, and the priest shall put it on the ridge of the right ear of him who is being cleansed, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. Just like that consecration, just like that ordination blood that was put on the extremities, the priest shall put it on the person who's being cleansed, who's being now ritually being cleansed. The priest shall take some of the log of oil and pour it in the palm of his own left hand, and the priest shall dip in his right finger. I got ink on me. His right finger under the palm of the left hand, and sprinkle some of the oil with his finger 7 times before the Lord. Some of the oil in his palm shall be put on by the priest on the ridge of the right ear of the one being cleansed, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, over the blood of the guilt offering. So just as they put some blood on the extremities, you put some of the oil on it, on top of it, on top of the blood. The rest of the oil in his palm, the priest shall put on the head of the one being cleansed. Thus the priest shall make expiation for him before the Lord. So a little blood and a little oil too. The priest shall then offer the sin offering and make expiation. So here it's called a sin offering. Here's the sin offering, and make expiation for the one being cleansed of his uncleanness. Last, the burnt offering shall be slaughtered. And the priest shall offer the burnt offering and the meal offering on the altar, and the priest shall make expiation for him. Then he shall be clean. So you can see the different offerings that were made. And if, however, he is poor and his means are insufficient, he shall take 1 male lamb for a guilt offering to be elevated in expiation for him, 1/10 of a measure of choice flour with an oil mixed in for a meal offering, and a log of oil, and 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, depending on his means, the one to be the sin offering and the other to be the burnt offering. So again, there is consideration for the person's financial means. On the 8th day of his cleansing, he shall bring them to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting before the Lord. The priest shall take the lamb of guilt offering and the log of oil and elevate them as an elevation before the Lord. When the lamb of guilt offering has been slaughtered, the priest shall take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the ridge of the right ear of the one being cleansed, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. The priest shall then pour some of the oil into the palm of his own left hand. And again, as you can see, this is the 8th day of his cleansing, right? So it's almost like circumcision. It's almost like a bris, in that he's kind of going through a rebirth, if you will. And with the finger on his right hand, the priest shall sprinkle some of the oil that is on the palm of his left hand 7 times before the Lord. Some of the oil in his palm shall be put on the priest on the ridge of the right ear, the one being cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, over the same place as the blood of the guilt offering. And what is left of the oil in his palm, the priest shall put on his head, the one being cleansed, to make expiation before the Lord. She shall then offer one of the turtle doves or pigeons, depending on the means, whichever he can afford, and the one is as a sin offering, and the other is a burnt offering, together with the meal offering. Thus the priest shall make expiation before the Lord for the one being cleansed. So again, it's really, if you think about it, if you go back here, it is a two-step process, if you will, of cleansing. And it requires blood and oil. It also requires a guilt offering and a sin offering, which seems, again, to be redundant, but there is a sense here that, again, unlike the thing we read at the beginning about a woman in birth who gives just the sin offering, there's also a guilt offering here as well. There really is a sense here that, again, maybe this skin disease is a result of someone messing up. Because before, where you could make the argument, well, maybe a woman just, like everybody, needs to be cleansed of all of the maybe mistakes that she might have made when she's there. Here, there really does seem to be really something wrong. And it leads us to the tradition that people got this skin disease for engaging in sinful behavior. So you're going to ask yourself, what could someone possibly do that would require them to be punished with a skin disease? Didn't say leprosy. Again, skin disease. What did someone do that would make them need to be punished this way, if you will? Somebody want to offer up what the tradition was that caused this to happen? Anybody remember? What?
Sexually transmitted diseases.
Mm-mm.
No?
Nope.
Oh?
Much, well, I shouldn't say much easier, much more likely to be done by people. I don't know if that's actually, yeah, I'm sure, I'm 100% sure that I can say that. I don't need to worry about it because we do this almost all the time. Anybody else? Why? What would somebody be guilty of? Now, according to Jewish tradition, and I always talk about this with kids when we study this section, the tradition, and they love this. Kids love this. Teen bar and bat mitzvah kids love this. According to Jewish tradition, nobody want to guess what sin it is? It's one that we do all the time. That's my last clue. Okay.
Kiss. Just kissing?
No. You guys are all focused on the wrong thing. No, it is come from the mouth though. No, it's
sneezing.
Gossip. It's gossip.
Oh.
It's the sin of gossip and using our mouths for the sake of gossiping or talebearing or spreading slander.
But how would we get skin infections from that? How would we get rashes?
Divine punishment. So you wonder where do they even get it from? Well, first of all, they get it from the fact that it's so common and we don't want people to do it. Now, did they just invent it? Well, look, they had to connect it to something. So what they did is they did something very clever. The rabbi said the word Metzora, which is the name of this Torah portion, right? And Metzora, connected to Tzora, that's the skin disease. Metzora is actually a compound word for Motzei Shem Ra, which is finding bad names for people or finding bad words. Motzei Shem Ra. Speaking ill of people is the way it's usually translated. And so they said the word Metzora is actually a compound, kind of a shortened version of that word, of those words, Motzei Shem Ra, speaking ill of people. So it's kind of a clever little connection, if you will. But they did come up with this idea that we have to be careful because if we engage in slander, we get punished with this skin disease. Now, what's interesting about it, of course, is that the punishment for it is very obvious, right? And not only is it obvious, but even when you were cured of it, it was obvious. So what the rabbis found interesting about this is this, and they taught this, that words spoken behind someone's back in privacy or in what we think of as, closed area to badmouth somebody always wind up spreading. And so they saw it as like a disease, like a skin disease that would eventually become public. And the consequences of such would be that the person would eventually become what they said in private would eventually be known in public, and what would be the punishment would be public, and people would know when someone did this. So even though they would think that, like, maybe the punishment for it would be something done, would be only something that they would know, it's not, because the words that they say are not known only by them. So and once they started spreading the rumors, then it becomes like an infection. So that's why the punishment is like this. So look, the rabbis were definitely trying to caution people from engaging in slander and realizing the problems we have of spreading rumors about people, because again, once they've been spread, there's no way to recall them. It's the famous story of the rabbi who tells the woman to spread the feathers, after she says that she's been spreading gossip about him. And then she comes back and says, what do I do now? And she says, go gather the feathers together. And she says, I can't do that. And he says, that's because once you've started spreading these words, you can never recall them. You can never undo that. And again, it's that kind of thing that people do sometimes when they send an email or text, or they'll say, I'd like to recall the last email. All that does is make everybody go back and read, what email did that person just send? They may never have seen it, but as soon as they say, I'd like to recall that last email, and everybody goes back, what did that person say? Because you've literally now just told people, I screwed up. So yeah, you can't recall an email. You can't undo it. I mean, you can't. And so it is horrific, because nowadays you're one click away from reading it, and it's tough. I mean, look, it's hard for me to go through my morning links and not click on stupid stories that are not just and once you pop on one of them, then the Yahoo thing thinks you're an idiot, which you are, and then you get 10 more stories the next day about the Kardashians or whatever the link was. So yeah, I mean, it's tough, because you try to not let it enter your thoughts, and you try not to dwell on stupid celebrity news or whatever, and you just can't. You're surrounded by it, so it's tough. And we recognize that it's tough to not watch it. It's tough not to participate in it. It's tough not to spread it. So it's a serious issue, obviously, and it's not any less serious today. So let us continue. On the 8th day of the cleansing, you shall bring to the priest of the attentive meeting. I think I read that part. Yep, I did. I went backwards too much. Okay. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, when you enter the land of Canaan that I give you as a possession, and I inflict an eruptive plague upon a house in the land you possess, the owner of the house shall come and tell the priest, saying, something like a plague has appeared in my house. And the priest shall order the house cleared before the priest enters to examine the plague, so that nothing in the house may become unclean. After that, the priest shall enter and examine the house. If, when he examines the plague in the walls of the house is found to consist of greenish or reddish streaks that appear to go deep in the wall, the priest shall come out of that house and the entrance of the house and close it up for 7 days. So, folks, right here, it seems that we have a disease that not only is in fabric, it's also in homes. It's also in the walls. Now, what is this? I mean, is it some kind of mildew? Is it some kind of mold? Why is this happening? Well, let's take a look at what happens when they discover it. And it says specifically in homes in the land of Israel. And as it says, when you enter the land of Canaan that I give you as a possession, and I inflict an eruptive plague on the house and the land you possess. Keep that in mind, because we're going to talk about that. On the seventh day, the priest shall return. If he sees the plague is spread on the walls of the house, the priest shall order the stones with the plague in them to be pulled out and cast outside the city into an unclean place. The house shall be scraped inside all around, and the coating that is scraped off shall be dumped outside the city gate, the city in an unclean place. So again, you take out the stones of the wall where the infection was, and you obviously have to take off the plaster first, and you have to dispose of the plaster, and you have to get it outside of the city. It says, they shall take other stones and replace the stones with them, and take other coating and plaster the house. If the plague again breaks out in the house, and after the stones have been pulled out and the house has been scraped and replastered, the priest shall come and examine if the plague is spread in the house. It is a malignant eruption, and it is in the house. It is unclean. The house shall be torn down, its stones and timbers and all the coating on the house, and taken to an unclean place outside the city. So you don't have to tear down the house if the plague doesn't come back after you take out the affected area. But if it keeps coming back, that house is messed up. You got to take it down. Now, why would a house have this? And the commentary on this, it was pointed out, the rabbis say, look, it says when you come into the land that you possess. So the rabbis said, well, when the Israelites came in and kicked out the Canaanites left, or they were killed in battle, whatever, and there were houses there, and the Jews inhabited the houses. The Israelites, I call them Jews yet, the Israelites, the tribes inhabited those houses. But they pointed out, well, if those houses were built by Canaanites, maybe there's something going on in those rooms. Now, before you say, well, it's because the Canaanites were worshiping other gods and the house is unclean because of that, that'd be a logical guess. It's not where they were going. They actually said, the rabbi said, that it's because the Canaanites, thinking that they would eventually come back, they would destroy the Israelites and come back and re-inhabit their homes, they hid their money in the walls of the homes. And so what God did in order to help the Israelites find the money that the Canaanites left behind is he caused the houses to occasionally get scaly, and wherever they tore up, that's where the treasures were hidden. So it was not in the Torah. It doesn't say that, but the rabbis try to come up with a reason for why does it say that the area that you possess. And so they said that that's why the houses were, the houses had this treasure, these treasures in the walls. So the Israelites were allowed to find them. And I will tell you, actually, we talked about this before. The idea of hiding treasures in your walls was actually a very old tradition, and people did it throughout the Middle Ages because, generally speaking, your house would be your house for generations. Come back, your family would find it, and your family would have access to those treasures. So hiding things in your walls was not uncommon. Unfortunately, in some cases, entire families, generations were destroyed, and so no one knew where the treasures were. So I told you that there was a treasure found in Germany just a few years ago, the Erfurt treasure, which was hidden during the late Middle Ages. And it turned out that, again, we don't know whether the family died in battle, in a pogrom, if you will, or in a plague. But they found a treasure in a wall as they were kind of going through a wall. They found the treasure. I'll show you a picture of it real quick. The treasure that they found was unbelievable. A treasure trove of Jewish objects that was found in the wall of a building. And I'll show you what they found. And again, it was only found a few years ago. It was a synagogue from 1349. And again, it was during the time coming back to it comes back to the Black Plague. It was during this time. So we're not exactly sure whether this was done during the Black Plague but I saw this stuff in Erfurt in Germany a couple of years ago. It's quite amazing. This is what was found. So this is real. I mean, this is the Erfurt treasure. And so these were hoards of coins. And so we know what the latest date this could have been hidden. This treasure weight is 28 kilograms, with around 24 kilograms, 3,141 silver coins and 14 silver ingots of different sizes. And the hoard contained over 700 individual items of Gothic goldsmith art. So this again was found in a wall.
Wow.
And you can see it. It's there but this was one of the rings that they found, a wedding ring that was found in the treasure. So it's quite amazing. And they actually found part of a wedding dress as well. So it's quite a like a, again, it was only found 20 years ago, and I guess 23 years ago. So I'm trying to see if they have a map of where they found it, where they actually found, they as they were knocking down a wall. But again, the idea of finding treasures in walls, my point is that it is not a myth. I mean, it did happen, and so when the rabbis wrote about that as the underlying reason why the Jews had to tear down these walls, that's why we have it. So they it says, whoever enters the house while it is closed up shall be unclean until evening. Whoever sleeps in the house must wash his clothes, and whoever eats in the house must wash his clothes. If you just were visiting. If, however, the priest comes and sees the plague is not spread in the house after the house was replastered, the priest shall pronounce the house clean, for the plague has healed. To purge the house, he shall take 2 birds, cedar wood, crimson stuff, and hyssop. And Harvey just asked, where did I post I posted the link in the chat. So if you look in the chat box, it has the Vimeo thing there just before. I don't make sure before we go that you see it. We're almost done though. He shall take the 2 birds, cedar wood, crimson stuff, and hyssop. He shall slaughter the 1 bird over fresh water in an earthen vessel. He shall take the cedar wood, the hyssop, the crimson stuff, and the live bird, and dip them in the blood of the slaughtered bird in the fresh water, and sprinkle it on the house 7 times. Having purged the house with the blood of the bird, the fresh water, the live bird, the hyssop, the cedar wood, the hyssop, and the crimson stuff, he shall set the live bird free outside the city in the open country. Thus he shall make expiation for the house, and it shall be clean. So again, very similar to what we have for a person, a house also could be clean. Such is the ritual, again, Torah, the Torah, for every eruptive affection, for scalds, for an eruption on cloth or house, for dwellings, for swellings, for rashes, or for discolorations, to determine when they are unclean and when they are clean. Such is the ritual concerning eruptions. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when any man has a discharge issuing from his member, he is unclean. The uncleanness from his discharge shall mean the following: whether his member runs with the discharge or is stopped up so that there is no discharge, his uncleanness means this: any bedding on which the one with the discharge lies shall be unclean, and every object on which he sits shall be unclean. Anyone who touches his bedding shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. Whoever sits on an object on which the one with the discharge has sat shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. Whoever touches the body of the one with discharge shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. If one with a discharge spits on one who is clean, the latter shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. Any means for writing that one with a discharge is mounted shall be unclean. Whoever touches anything that was under him shall be unclean until evening. And whoever carries such things shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. If one with a discharge, without having rinsed his hands in water, touches another person, that person shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. An earthen vessel that one with a discharge touches shall be broken, and any wood implement shall be rinsed with water. When one with a discharge becomes clean of his discharge, he shall count off 7 days for his cleansing, wash his clothes, and bathe his body in fresh water. He shall then be clean. So again, we began the Torah portions, the double portions, with women, and the fact that they, when they have a baby, have to go through a ritual. We finish with a man who, again, in this case, definitely seems to be a source of illness. And in the meantime, in the middle of this, we read all about Tzarat. We actually now read about a man who is essentially also, again, it's not procreative. The fact is that this discharge is literally an illness. So it's interesting that we had a woman having a baby, we had Tzarat, and then we finish with the discharge. Begin with women, have a discussion about disease for men and women, and then finish with men. So he counts off 7 days after bathing and washing his clothes. On the 8th day, you shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons and come before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting and give them to the priest. The priest shall offer them. One is a sin offering and the other is a burnt offering. Thus the priest shall make expiation on his behalf for his discharge before the Lord. And here, again, there's a sin offering and there's a burnt offering, very much like what it was at the beginning with the woman. No guilt offering, but a sin offering and a burnt offering. When a man has now here, again, it finishes with this. When a man has an emission of semen, he shall bathe his whole body in water and remain unclean until evening. All cloth or leather on which semen falls shall be washed in water and remain unclean until evening. And if a man has carnal relations with a woman, they shall bathe in water and remain unclean until evening. When a woman has a discharge, her discharge being blood from her body, she shall remain in her impurity 7 days. Whoever touches her shall be clean until evening. Anything that she lies on during her impurity shall be unclean, and anything that she sits on shall be unclean. Anyone who touches her bedding shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. And anyone who touches any object on which she sat shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. Be it the bedding or be it the object on which she has sat, on touching it, he shall be unclean until evening. And if a man lies with her and her impurity is communicated to him, he shall be unclean 7 days, and any bedding on which he lies shall become unclean. When a woman has a discharge of blood for many days, not at the time of her impurity or when she has a discharge beyond her period of impurity, she shall be unclean, as though at the time of her impurity, as long as her discharge lasts. Any bedding on which she lies while her discharge lasts shall be for her like bedding during impurity, and any object on which she sits shall become unclean, as it does during her impurity. Whoever touches them shall be unclean. He shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. When she becomes clean of her discharge, she shall count off 7 days, and after that she shall be clean. And on the 8th day she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons and bring them to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest shall offer, one is a sin offering and the other is a burnt offering, and the priest shall make expiation on her behalf for her unclean discharge before the Lord. So again, we read the last lines of this Torah portion, we come to this very important idea. You shall put the Israelites on guard against their uncleanness, lest they die through their uncleanness by defiling my tabernacle. And here it does say the words, back to Mike's original point, here it uses the word Mishkan, the tabernacle, which is among them. Such is the ritual concerning him who has a discharge, concerning him who has an emission of semen and becomes unclean thereby, and concerning her who is in menstrual infirmity, and concerning anyone, male or female, who has a discharge, and concerning a man who lies with an unclean woman. And that, my friends, is the end of the portion. But as you noticed, it kind of goes back to the very beginning of Tazria, which kind of dealt with the menstrual cycle, or at least with women at the beginning giving birth. So, look, I will tell you this. It does not have a lot to do with our lives today. in the sense that, again, people will make this connection to our current COVID situation. It does have a huge impact on a daily basis with Orthodox Jews whose wives, when they go through their menstruation, are not allowed to be with their husbands until after 7 days of their stopping their menstrual cycle, and again after they've gone to the mikveh in order to re-enter into marital relations with their husband. This 100% is followed every day by hundreds of thousands of Jewish women who every day are trying to make sense of whether their discharge is a discharge or whether it's a menstrual, whether it's her period, or whether, again, it is some other type of not part of the menstrual cycle. And again, it has to do with what the blood was like and how long it lasts, etc. But until she goes through a 7-day period of being clean or being free from this and then going into the mikveh, she can't have sex with her husband. And there are people who, again, this is a very important law for them. Without getting into too graphic of details, this does actually, again, whatever people want to take away from COVID or whatever else, that's your, that your reading of it. You can definitely be inspired to make decisions. But I'm telling you that this has actually practical effect for lots of people. And there is a real, why am I finishing with this? I don't even know. There are rabbis in our country, in the United States and in other parts of the world, who's essentially one of the most important parts of their job is determining whether a woman's discharge is menstruation or something else, and literally have to look at underwear to decide this. I will tell you with all sincerity, I'm so thankful that this is not part of my job description. I will tell you that I have absolutely no desire to ever take this responsibility on. So thankfully, we do not.
Well, there's an interesting issue in chapter 13. Whenever there's a skin condition, that people go to the priest. And in 15, people decide for themselves to wash, and that they know they're unclean, but it doesn't mention going to the priest.
It's interesting. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So you notice that change. And then again, here back towards the end, at the end, well, let's put it this way. Here at the end, the priest only really does the expiation for them. It doesn't do the determination.
Right.
Yeah. So there is a real thing that the priest does when it comes to determining whether somebody is sick, the diagnosis, if you will, on their body. And then they also have the responsibility of kind of spiritually cleansing them. So you're absolutely right. That's a great point. The ritual of cleaning somebody is part of it, a big part of it. But also there is a diagnostic part that doesn't seem to be required for the priest especially when it comes to your specific thing, is when they have to determine whether a man's discharge is a problem or not. I will tell you that there seems to be, I would say, less of maybe you could say that maybe it doesn't really matter, because if he has any discharge at all, they're basically saying it's bad, and it doesn't even matter. you've got to deal with it as a, you just have to deal with it. And again, you could say the same thing for when it gets to the emission of semen. It is interesting that the priest doesn't actually have to determine, the priest doesn't have to determine the woman either in chapter 15. So it's not like the man, it's not like the priest goes, I don't want to know whether this man has a discharge coming out of his penis. I keep that away from me, which by the way, also would not want to have that job. But I will tell you that it does seem that when it comes to these types of things, it doesn't seem like there actually needed to be a priestly distinction on the discharge, because it doesn't say that the priest looks at the discharge.
Right.
No, the priest doesn't look at the color of the discharge. I'm telling you that this responsibility for rabbis is, I mean, this is like people make fun of it. I mean, they kind of, they laugh. I mean, I just made fun of it. So, but I think it's a serious issue today because, look, people make fun of it. I mean, they do. I mean, like I said, I did, but there is this serious issue of whether people can, when it comes down to it, is they want to know whether they can have sex or not. I mean, it really comes down to, are we able to do it? It is, people wanted to essentially know that they could go back to having normal sexual relations, and that's why they did it. It wasn't because they had some weird perversion about looking at people's underwear. They were serious about making sure that women were able to return to, women and men were able to return to sexual relations. So that's what it was based on. But the fact that the rabbis actually have to make these determinations is based on the idea that family purity is a big issue within the Jewish community today. I think it's one of the more determining factors on whether people are going to live an ultra Orthodox life. It's not the only one. I mean, it's, there's lots of decisions, but family purity issues and issues like how many children you're going to have, and those are big issues for people. And there were issues that sometimes are breaking points for people that, that they don't want to deal with it. Some people saw Unorthodox over the last year on Netflix. And that was one of the big issues. And that was that they focused on was this woman trying to come to terms with having her sexual identity or sexual requirements, if you will, being dictated to her by rabbis and stuff. So if you read her story and what really happened to her, because it's based on a true story, it was much more complicated than that. And it wasn't, but they definitely touched on that. And I think they touch on that because it's such a big difference from our world. And even in the Jewish community, it's one of those things where we kind of step back and go, wait, what's that? That's not, I don't do that. And I will tell you that I do think that the whole concept of like checking people's underwear and making sure that I do think that that's more of a modern issue. You don't hear about people talk. First of all, maybe they were just more modest, but you don't see writings about it in the rabbinical, you don't see people saying, well, this was a common thing where they would go to the rabbi and say, is this a discharge or not? So it's much more of a modern issue. I just don't think it was done as much as people at least say it's being done today. So
just like you mentioned about just the gossip, the very simple thing about gossip. Well, is it possible in chapter 15 about, the issue of discharge? It's just something as simple as if somebody sneezes or if somebody has a runny nose or they, that an eye infection, whatever it is, that a discharge could be not, semen or menstruation is just something just very basic biology. You get sick, you have a cold, you sneeze, that's a discharge.
Yeah, except for the fact that it actually says issuing from his member. So,
okay.
So the discharge is,
okay.
They are concerned with it. And of course, they bring up the fact that the person then might have spit on somebody, right? It says, if one with a discharge spits on somebody, but it does say, from the member. So it does specifically say.
Yes, it does.
It does say it right there, Basavo. So, the word actually is used over and over again without the word for member, but the word that is used over and over again, zuv, is specifically just it could say, a penile discharge every time. It could actually have said that because that is the word for it. And they were definitely concerned about it, as you can imagine, because it probably was indicative of a sexually transmitted disease or some kind of virus that was easily spread, through sexual contact. And it says that. It says if a woman had sex with him, that she's also now, unclean. So, it's a. Where was that issue? It was. It says it right there. Anyone who.
What I'm puzzled with is they wash, but they're still unclean till evening. What does that mean? They wash themselves, they wash their clothes, and then they remain unclean until evening.
Yeah, you're right. It says it every single time, right? And
I don't understand what happens in the afternoon.
Well, no, but I think
cooling off period.
No, but I think in all seriousness, it allows the time actually elapse might mean, I think what it really is doing in a way that they probably understood, that if they wash and they think that they're clean, but if they give it a little bit of time, they can actually see whether it's really gone or not. Because if it's still there,
then they're still unclean, right?
They're still unclean, and I think that really did give it some time after they think that they're clean. They wash it, and let's face it. The washing itself could actually show that no, it's still on there.
Yeah.
Right. And the water itself, the act of washing, could actually spread it. In which case, if it's still live, if it's still an active virus, or the bacteria is still there, then they're spreading it, and you'd see it in other areas where the person washed. So I think it actually allows for people to see whether or not it really is gone or not. But
you're right.
I think that's probably what's at root of the at that, which is, let's absolutely make sure that it's gone. And I think again, that's kind of the reasons why people quarantine for 40 days. The original concept, again, that's where the word comes from, Italian, for the 40 days. I think part of it was like there's 30 days, it's like a month, and then there was like 10 days beyond, which was to absolutely make sure that it was gone. So like 30 days, it should never come back after 30 days. And I think that kind of was like, that was a normal period, that if it's not there for 30 days, it's not a disease that you have to worry about anymore. But I think the 10 extra days are almost like, let's make absolutely sure that it's not coming back. And I think like that 10 days is really the bonus period. Interestingly, again, the concept of quarantining for an unknown period of time, that completely goes against the actual inherent meaning of the word. Quarantine is actually for a set period of time. You can't say people, well, we're quarantining you forever or for an unknown period of time, or until we think that you can come back. And so, like originally when they were talking about having people under quarantine, at first they were kind of not clear about it. I think, they kind of came up with like 2-week period. And then, they started saying, yeah, really 10 days is all that was necessary for with COVID is to see whether someone was sick 10 days later. So I do think that, at least when it came time to actually saying, this is how long you're cut off if you have the disease, but the whole idea of quarantining everybody, that's not.
It really doesn't make sense.
It's not really
everybody healthy and close.
That's not really based on anything that we've seen.
And it's not based on science or religion.
Anything we've ever seen before.
Yep.
So, folks, I will tell you, I hope everyone continues to stay healthy and stay good. I hope that everybody is, again, I went to the Dodger game last night, as I said, definitely felt like doing something that I felt like, I had been deprived of. Not that I go to that many Dodger games. I really don't. I don't go to more than 4 or 5 a year, but going to it made me feel like I did get back into like normal activity, I think, for a lot of people. Right. But folks, I really wish you well. Again, we look forward to seeing you either at services on Friday night or coming up in other days coming up. And we do have an eat out together a time on the 20th, a week from yesterday. We're going to be over at Neely's Skillet on the 20th, having a meal together, and it's outdoors and people can come at 7:00. We're going to be there a little bit earlier, and just having a meal together is going to be a nice thing. So we've been trying to put together at least an outdoor activity, and we're going to have some other indoor activities coming up for sure in May. So
when you say the indoor activities, are you telling us that you're starting to get clarification about when that services can happen?
No, we're getting different messages, but I think based on kind of what we're seeing, we're probably going to have our first open, if you will, bar and bat mitzvahs in May 16th, and then again on May 30th. We're hoping to have our first 2 b'nai mitzvah. I'm pretty sure at least as of right now, that's the goal. We did unfortunately have a small flood in our congregation last Friday, we think, between Friday and Saturday. I know we had a baby naming there in the building on Saturday morning, and we came in and there was a flood in the carpeting in the back. And the synagogue right now is being dried out, dehumidified. Happened at the absolute worst time. I don't know why this couldn't have happened 6 months ago when we were not able to go into the building, but it's really the worst. And of course, we didn't notice it because we don't think it was more than 2 days. But interestingly enough, we may have to pull the walls apart to find
there may be hidden treasure.
And exactly, it was inhabited by the Jehovah's Witnesses before, but I don't think they had treasure in it. But yes, it would be very interesting if we find something in the walls. But, yeah.
Well, the Supreme Court's trying to help you.
Yeah, no, I know, and I think it seems like we were really close until we had this. But I like I said, I'm hoping that there's not going to be more complications. I really hope not. But and again, it was absolutely the worst time. We finally went back in and had a baby naming this last week, which was wonderful. And yet, there we go. We discovered it. So we'll see. But we'll definitely be doing stuff soon, don't we now? All righty. And I'll send the link around. Some people, I guess, couldn't see the link on the
got the link.
Okay.
I couldn't find it.
It's right there on the
chat.
Just cut and paste it into your
It's chat. It's not on chat. All I have is
I will.
Sandy saying good night.
I will. I'll send it. I don't know why you don't have it. Oh, you know what?
I don't.
You have, everybody else has it, right? You see it? Okay, I'm gonna send it to people though, because Mike said he didn't have it either. So I'm gonna send it. I'm gonna send it to you, Harvey, too.
Okay.
All right, everybody.
Good
night.
Thank you, everybody.
Good to see you all.
Joyce.
Good night, everybody. And
Bye-bye.
Thank you again. Good
Bye-bye.
seeing you.
Seeing you.
Thank you for calling, David.
You're welcome.